So hello again. I've been giving talks on the virtue of charity, which we call love, that practical love that we want to have. And this one is about deciding to love, that love is a decision. But life is one long chain of decisions, one after another. Not to decide is to decide, isn't it? Huh? And our decisions build upon one another over time and give shape to our lives. So if I'm going to become a loving person, I have to get my will in action, right, in making decisions. So our life will be truly human if all of our decisions are characterized by love, like Jesus. It's a wonderful thing, isn't it, to have free will, but we can misuse our free will. Our free will is geared towards love. It's geared towards sharing in the love of God for others. So love is, as I said before, to will the good of the other and then to do good for the other. It's radically other-centered. So we have to work on ourselves, really. We have to work on our decision-making to put to death our selfish, ego-centered impulses, the desires and cravings of the flesh. We have to put that to death. We have to actually break the patterns of the old man and allow to emerge within us a new way of being, which is to love, to decide to love. Now, Jesus said to his disciples, whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and for the gospel's will save it. So if you want to be a follower of mine, anyone who wants to be a follower of mine must take up his cross daily. That's deny himself and take up his cross daily, to renounce himself. So there's a certain self-renunciation, a certain self-denial that's involved in the choice to love, because oftentimes we don't want to go that way. We prefer our own desires rather than to look for and to help the desires of others. So there's a challenge to die to oneself every day, and probably many times during the day. Unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains but a grain of wheat. But if it dies, if it breaks open, it actually yields a rich harvest. Jesus, in saying those words, was saying it first of all about himself, about his own death, the pattern of his death. And we, as Paul says, are to reproduce the pattern of Jesus' death in our daily life, to die to ourselves for the sake of the greater act of love that we can make. So that's the pattern that we're meant to have, to be a man of God for others. So at every step in the journey, there's a decision to love, a decision to die to my selfish instincts. So it says in Romans 15:3, Jesus did not indulge his own feelings as he hung on the cross. We know that. He reached out to the man who was suffering next to him, the man who, opened his heart to Jesus. Remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus says, this very day, you will have paradise. This is Lord not thinking of himself, even at that extremity. You see, we can be so focused on our own lives and our own desires and our own needs and not really focus on the good of others. So this is the secret of the saints, to make love the daily orientation of our lives, and that the decisions that we make are always according to the way of love, the way of concern for the good of the other and concern for doing practical and serving acts for the other. Now, Teresa of Lisieux says the smallest act of pure love is more valuable to the church than anything else. Now, love proves itself by deeds. To use every opportunity, she says, for making little sacrifices, be they like a look, a word that you speak, any insignificant thing, but it can be very significant to the person when you act that way out of love. Now, she had a sister in the convent, I told this story before maybe, who she had a natural aversion for. that meant that when she saw this woman, she felt like she wanted to run in the opposite direction. There's probably someone in your life like that. And she chose to love, but she had to ask the Lord. She said, Lord, I can't do it. I can't possibly love this person. And Jesus said, that's okay. Just invite me into your heart and I'll give you the power to love through my being abiding within you. And so that's what she did. And she began to do just little acts of love and concern for this woman. And after a year or so, when they were together, this woman said to her, I don't know why it is that all the people in this convent, you love me most. So she felt that was a great victory to be able to love. Maximilian Kolbe is a good example of this, isn't he? That Polish Capuchin priest in the Auschwitz concentration camp in 1941. A prisoner had escaped from Block 14, and members were all parade on the parade ground for the whole day in the heat of the sun, being punished, standing in the scorching sun. And Commander Fritz decided that he'd randomly select 10 guys and put them into the starvation bunker. So he was pointing fingers out to this one, that one, and he pointed to one guy, and this man said, oh no, he cried out, goodbye, my dear wife, goodbye, my children. They're orphaned now. They have no father. And then suddenly, unexpectedly, a prisoner broke ranks. You didn't normally do that. And he walked up to the commander. And the commander said, what does this Polish pig want? And Maximilian Kolbe said, I'm a Polish Catholic priest. I want to take this man's place because he has wife and children. Now, of course, the commander hated Polish people. He hated Catholic priests. So he had the perfect person to put into the starvation bunker. So he did. But from that starvation bunker, there emanated just beautiful songs, hymns to God. Usually people were screaming and crying out in pain. But no, Maximilian taught them how to sing songs, to pray the rosary, and to trust in God as they died. And he was one of the last ones to die. And they finally finished him off with carbolic acid. And the guy who did that act said that there was something in his eyes that remained with him. It was love, even for the one who was finishing him off. He spent his time actually caring for others, giving them hope. Even the guards were impressed by the gentle love that he had, the self-sacrificing love, a light in the darkness, a sign that love conquers evil. Even in that worst hell house, there was love that shone out, really. But what I wanted to point out is something that's really important. And this is where real greatness is, you see. The real greatness of the saints was not just in that moment, maybe, that they were martyred. I mean, Maximilian Kolbe was actually, called a martyr and celebrated as a martyr by the Pope, really because he gave himself in that way for another man. But you see, that moment, that decision that he made, that was really the climax of a whole range of decisions right through his life that had led to that. He was known well before this as a man of selfless love. And when he finally came into the prison, he was well known for, someone who might be extra hungry, that he'd give half of his food, his bread he'd give to them, or something that he had, some of his soup he'd hand to somebody else. He was known for his self-sacrificing love already. You see, that's the sort of person he had become. And this is what we talk about when we talk about character. Your decisions now that you make, each decision you make to love, starts to build in you a habit, a virtue of loving. And that virtue, as it develops more and more, because love is the fundamental virtue of all the virtues, that builds character in you. And you become that sort of person. So that's Maximilian Kolbe was already that sort of man. It didn't have just one moment when he actually stepped up to the mark. No, he stepped up to the mark of being the martyr through a whole lot of preliminary moments right through his life where he had made the choice to love. He was a man of love, a man who loved God and a man for others in loving them. So what I'm saying there is, don't think, and dream about, well, one day I'll be a martyr or something. Don't be thinking, I'll have to wait till I have my future opportunity to prove that I'm great in loving. No, now is the time. The future is in God's hands, but now is the time to choose to every moment of your life to put love in there. Choose to meet God in that moment. It's like a sacrament of God's presence to you each moment. And so choose God's way in that moment, which is a way of loving. So make the best of every moment and put love into it. That's what really matters. Now, when John of the Cross was close to death, he had been really tormented by a fellow brother who was jealous of him and was supposed to be looking after him, but he was somewhat tormenting him. John of the Cross's love for that man was such that eventually the man himself was converted to the way of love himself. And John had written about this to a friend of his. And what he'd said is, if you find there is no love, where there is no love, put love. Right? That's what we're called to do. Every moment of our life, whether you find love there or you don't find love, put love there. And then love will be discovered by all. So commit yourself to be a man of love, a man who is not so caught up in himself that he can't get out of himself for the sake of others. Get over yourself. Get over yourself. Don't build a life on yourself. Build a life for the sake of others, whether it's your family who you serve, whether it's as a consecrated man or a priest that you serve. We're all called to serve beyond ourselves. We all have a vocation higher than just simply for me. Let's look to the saints and be inspired by them. Maximilian Kolbe, help us here. Help us come to our aid, because we need to know what it is to love. We need that grace within us, that only by God's grace can we love as we're called to love. And let's listen to Jesus when he says, love one another as I have loved you. Bless his name.